Hi, my name's Steven. This is going to be my flight scenario presentation assignment for scenario number 2. So starting right off the bat, this trip's going to be from Devil Hills, North Carolina to Lynchburg, Virginia. The distance is going to be 188 nautical miles and it's going to take an hour and 56 minutes to get there. This trip is already longer than any cross country that I've ever flown, so I don't know if I would necessarily conduct it. That might not be the best idea. I'm also unfamiliar with the terrain in this area, considering that I live in Florida, so I would also conduct a very in-depth flight plan if I were to continue with this flight. In this scenario, as the pilot, I will have recently got my pilot certificate and have 75 hours total flight time, with only 12 of those hours being cross-country time. I also will have not flown cross-country in a couple of months. Already knowing that, that's not going to be the best idea to continue on. To do this flight, I would rather, conduct a cross-country flight with an instructor or even solo rather than taking friends on a cross-country flight after not flying cross-country in a couple months. With instrument training to begin the following semester, that could cause me to, really want to get it done, build more flight time and build experience, but ideally, you wouldn't want to conduct this flight in my opinion. The plane that I'd be flying would be equipped with a 6-pack as opposed to the G1000 that I'm used to training in this scenario. And so because of that, I would want to review how that traditional 6-pack works. I found a great article on it. It's called 6-Pack, the Primary Flight Instruments by Mr. McKay. And I would review that article in depth to familiarize myself with those instruments. I do currently fly with the Garmin 430 GPS, so I am familiar with how to use the direct enter process, regardless if the instructor had showed me how to use it or not. And then this plane that I will have been renting has 40 degrees of flaps and no carb heat. So that's not going to be a major factor considering the fact that I land with 20 degrees of flaps. So having the extra degrees of flaps and no carb heat, that's not going to really play a big role in this scenario. The engine will have been difficult to start. That by itself, not really a huge deal, but with the magnetos running rough during the run-up and the mag check, that's right there for me. That's too much. I would cut the flight right there. I wouldn't want to fly a plane with an engine running rough. That's just too dangerous to me. Regardless if the spark plugs have been replaced in the past 10 hours. The environment, take me off on a runway that's 3,000 feet. I would do a short field takeoff. It's a little bit shorter than I'm used to, but a short field takeoff in a Cessna 172, you'll have plenty of runway to be able to take off. And landing on a 7,100 foot runway, you're gonna have plenty of runway to land on. A density altitude of 2,500 feet and a high humidity is gonna reduce the climb performance of the plane. But if you keep that in mind and you know what you're doing, you'll be fine. Having 8 miles of visibility and a haze, still going to be a VFR and it's still going to be safe to conduct that flight. Having a 14 knot crosswind, gusting to 0, could be a factor, but I would just set up alternate airports along the way into the wind, with runways into the wind, to have safe alternatives to land at, and so I could refill fuel to meet my 1 hour reserve minimums. A couple external pressures. This is to fulfill a dream in this scenario, and I've been making promises to myself. That's going to lead to bad things, especially if bad weather arises. You could develop get-there-itis, which is terrible. You don't want to have that develop in your brain. You want to be able to land the plane safely, and when you should, you don't want to develop a figment in your imagination, which you really just want to get there. That leads to very bad things, accidents, and possibly even deaths. Especially when carrying passengers, if you experience worsening weather conditions, you just need to put the plane on the ground as safe as possible, as soon as possible. And just continuing on with a couple of those external pressures, you might, in this scenario, I'd be landing after dark because we took off too late. Me personally, I just conducted some night flights and I am extremely comfortable at night flying. I've actually had my best landings at night, which is kind of backwards to me, but for me it worked. And then although there is an approaching cold front in this scenario, and it's not expected to hit for another 2 hours, it could still have bad weather preceding it in front of it, such as thunderstorms or convective activity. And because of that, you might want to land at one of those alternate airports, one of those predetermined alternate airports. Overall, I think this flight should not be conducted with how many things that could be going wrong, and it just not being an overall safe scenario. I'd say this flight is not safe to be conducted. Thank you for your time.